Okay, I got my yellow hoodie on. Spoiler alert, I love this album. This is CX Talks, Weatherday, Hornet Disaster, Review Episode 1. Okay, so I did 2 reviews for this album. The first one is me desperately trying not to compare this album, Hornet Disaster, to Weatherday's debut album, Come In. My second is me realizing that comparison is kind of how this album needs to be reviewed. So I'm going to compare these 2 albums, and in doing so, sort of share my thoughts on Hornet Disaster. But first, I want to just give a really quick intro to Weatherday. Weatherday is an outfit of Swedish producer, songwriter, visual artist Sputnik. In terms of genre, I think at its core, Weatherday is emo, with huge influences of like noise rock and lo-fi and DIY, and it branches out into all kinds of like crazy sonic adventures. Let's start with the first track. In the case of Hornet Disaster, we have the title of the track being the title of the album. So Hornet Disaster is track number 1, and it starts off with this kind of distorted robot-y vocalization of Hornet Disaster, and then this pulsing instrumental that really sets the pace for the record. And then this short vocal passage, it repeats itself twice. I'm going to read it off. Outside my window, by the bed, a streetlight's beaming, there's no end. And then again, outside my window, by the bed, a streetlight's beaming, there's no end. Clearly very self-referential, really sets this sort of like imagery and invites us into Weatherday's sort of sound world. Okay, so let's go to Come In's opening track, same title as the album, a vocalization of Come In, well, like a knock, and then the words come in, and then this really fast-paced instrumental section that really sets the pace for the rest of the record. And then a short vocal passage. I'm still here, I'm almost floored, poorly drawn, hope you're bored, sinking feeling, Weatherday, I'll be here if you'll stay, so come in. Again, very self-referential, literally the name Weatherday in that passage. I want to note this little bit, poorly drawn. I think there's a lore to Weatherday's work, but I don't really know the lore. I always kind of assume this character is Oswald. I don't know if that's the case. Weatherday fans, please correct me if I'm wrong. But hopefully my point stands. You can see very similar opening tracks. And so I think it's inviting us to kind of, if not compare them, to look at these 2 albums as though they exist in the same world. And if you don't believe me yet, I think this is the giveaway. So there's this little melody that runs through this track. Please don't copyright strike me. It's my first video. I heard this melody when I was first listening to this album, and I was like, why is that so familiar? I was going through the filing cabinets and trying to figure out where I had heard that before. And yeah, you guessed it.
'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free.
The classic American folk tune that I sang in grade 3 choir. Yeah, so obviously not that, although it is weirdly similar. So I listened through Come In after listening to Hornet Disaster, and of course, at the very end of the last track, we have So I wouldn't describe Hornet Disaster necessarily as a sequel to Come In, but it's clear that we're living in the same world, and there is definitely a through line. And obviously this through line is more than just this little melody. It's a whole sound world, but I want to key in on this melody. In classical music, we might call this a leitmotif. And I want you to listen for how often this leitmotif comes up in slight variations throughout the album. But I also want to posit a little concept that this has inspired in me. Maybe there's a terminology for it that I'm not aware of, but it got me thinking about this idea of like a shadow motif. You don't necessarily hear the leitmotif being played, but there's these spaces in the album where you can perceive it. It's not there, but you can so easily imagine it being there that your brain almost fills it in. I want to toy with that in my own music. So if anyone knows anything about this idea, maybe there's a different term for it, but I like this concept of like a shadow motif. Okay, so we have this leitmotif, shadow motif, this sort of sonic through line between the two albums. We have characters reappearing in the titles of the tracks. So this name Agatha comes up in both albums. There's a lot of connection between the two albums. I think I've made that pretty clear at this point. That said, I wouldn't say that Hornet Disaster feels like a sequel to Come In. They feel like two separate albums. I would describe Hornet Disaster more as the logical progression of Come In. Come In is sort of like Sputnik sort of searching, beginning to build this sound world. And then Hornet Disaster is kind of like Sputnik finding this artistic gold mine and manically throwing everything into that. I think of the artist JPEG Mafia, and he talks about some of the albums he's written, and in writing those albums, he has like 70 tracks and then whittles it down to a more concise album. I feel like something similar could be true for Weatherday. It really does feel like this album, Hornet Disaster, is just Sputnik finding all kinds of inspiration and just going for it in this concise sonic world, but also going in all kinds of new branching directions. And that's a really cool thing to see from an artist. But does progress mean a better album? Well, Come In is in my top 5 albums of all time. Hornet Disaster is not. I really do love this album, but I think something that Come In captures that Hornet Disaster doesn't is this. Whatever this is, this sort of liminal existential feeling. In a lot of ways, I feel like Come In just transcends language, transcends description, and we're left with this very distinct feeling. Hornet Disaster doesn't really do that, at least not in the same way. What I will say is Hornet Disaster is far more expansive. Honestly, I feel like the songwriting on Hornet Disaster is technically better. We have 19 tracks, which is huge, almost an hour and a half of music. And the songs themselves are all killer. It's kind of 19 tracks of all killer, no filler. And that makes for a really impressive album. But there's just this je ne sais quoi. There's this feeling to Come In that just can't quite get captured in the same way in Hornet Disaster, almost because the songs are individually so good. So I'll leave the comparisons there, but I do want to say a little PSA. I feel like such a dork saying this, but I also feel like I should sort of caution you if you're going into listening to this album and this type of music for the first time. This album, being 19 tracks long, is very harsh on your ears. I think it's important. There is a silent epidemic going on of young people losing their hearing. We live in an increasingly loud world, but also the way that we listen to music through earbuds especially is really rough on our ears. And this album hits these spikes in like the 2500 hertz range, and maybe a little higher, that can be really rough on your ears. So listen with caution. This album is long and uncompromising and kind of brutal on your ears, and that makes it so admirable. But at the same time, listen responsibly. Okay, PSA over. My phone died, so I think that's the universe telling me to wrap this up. But first, I want to quickly go through a handful of tracks that really stood out to me on the album. I know 19 tracks can be a little intimidating, especially in this style if you haven't heard this kind of music before. So here's like 5 tracks I would really recommend off the album. I'll start with Angel, which is a little bit of a gatekeepy one, but it represents so much of what I've talked about in this review. It really is Weatherday taking their songwriting just to another level. It is one of the most ergonomic songs I've ever heard. And what do I mean by that? It's a 2-minute track that could easily be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. There's just so much content, so many ideas and sounds and sections all jam-packed into this tight 2-minute track. And they're all thread together so flawlessly. The next song I want to talk about is Hug, which I'm laughing because I cannot listen to this song without crying. It is an absolute tearjerker for me. I think it has to do with like the angle that the lyrics come from. I read it as like this parent trying to cheer up their child. Good job, sweetheart. And then more or less, you've accomplished your tasks today. You've done a good job. You tried your best. And something about that just digs into me. I want to elaborate on this, but I also want to keep this review concise. So let me know if I'm making the right decision here or not. But the spark notes is we live in this hyper productivity oriented culture, right? And the post-capitalist superstructure imposes this idea that our self-worth is entirely tied to what we produce, what we accomplish. There is a truth to, if you want to feel better, start by making your bed, accomplish little tasks, and branch out. And that's a good place to start. But the issue is that there's no end. There is no satiation for productivity. There is no ultimate goal that you accomplish and feel entirely fulfilled. And so what this song represents to me is like this attempt to make someone feel better, but there's an underlying something that isn't fulfilled in the solution of good job, in the solution of accomplishment. And I think that there's a lot to dissect there. So I'll just leave that there. I think Hug captures that feeling, that discrepancy, that conflict really well. And it makes me cry. Pulka is super interesting because when I listen to Weatherday, I often don't understand what they're saying. And then occasionally a word or a phrase pokes out and really hits me. In this case, though, I was like, okay, even for Weatherday, this is kind of crazy. I can't figure out anything they're saying here. So I looked it up, and it's because it's in Swedish. Yep. So I don't know what it's about. I don't know what the lyrics are saying here, but I will say the sound of Swedish in these instrumental textures sounds so good. So Weatherday, if you ever want to write more in Swedish, I won't know what you're saying, but I'm totally here for it. Ripped Apart by Hands, another single leading up to the album. And this probably has Weatherday's catchiest section, period. Around 55 seconds, there's this moment, and it's so catchy, and it's so just sticky, and it scratches this very specific itch. And I'd love to play it, but I think part of what helps it scratch that itch is the 55 seconds that leads up to it, is everything preceding it, right? And then so when this moment does come, it's like this crazy catharsis. I feel similarly about Green Tea Seaweed Sea. I think that's the title, something like that. We have more like orchestral instrumentation almost, at least like this flute instrumentation that is almost like this oasis feeling in an album so packed with dense distortions. These moments of instrumental change-ups are really effective, and Weatherday does them so well. And then lastly, Heaven Smile, the last track on the album. I was listening to this album with my partner, and we both thought that the album had finished, and then this last song, Heaven Smile, was like whatever was next in the queue. But no, it's part of the album, and it sounds so different. It still has a lot of the idiosyncrasies of Weatherday, but it sounds very different. It's the first time we like fully step outside of the sound world that we had been living in for the entire album. And I'm curious about this. If I was to give a number score to the album, I feel like this might deter that score, but it also intrigues me so much. And I'm glad it's there, because now I'm having conversations like, what is this? What's the deal? And so I have a hypothesis that in the same way that the last song off of Come In can almost be the bridge into the first song off Hornet Disaster, maybe Heaven Smile is the bridge to whatever album project is next for Weatherday. I don't know. That's my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. But in any case, it is a cool sounding song, and I'm curious what it's doing there. So overall, I think this album is fantastic. I loved it. I'm going to do tier lists for my albums. So this one is an A tier. I don't think it's an instant classic for me, but it is a really fantastic album that I will certainly be revisiting. And there's not a lot that sounds like it. So if you want a unique listen, a lot of emotional impact, a lot of interesting textures centered around mostly distortions, but generally unique, uncompromising album, this is the one for you. So Chekhov's hoop. Here's the deal. If I make a shot, you have to subscribe, maybe comment something like nice shot. If I miss, you get to decide what I review next. It could be an album, it could be a film, whatever you want, really. It could be a work of your own. If you're an artist watching, always feel free to ask if you want a review or if you just want some feedback. I'm here for you. Love my artist community. Okay, here's the shot. No edits, one take. Oh, that was brutal. So, yeah, you don't have to subscribe if you don't want to, but certainly feel free to anyways. Okay, bye.